So the stuff that Mtume and Lucas were able to do in the late 70s and early 80s deserves a lot more props from these music critics who swear that, you know, post-disco R&B just wasn't good. Y'all missing out. What's going on, everybody? You're right on time for another ride on the Groove Line with your host, Chris Stevens. Hopefully, you all are doing well out there. This is part number 2, numero dos, of our tribute to the late, great James Mtume. He was, of course, his birthday was Saturday, January 3rd. He was born January 3rd, 1946, passed away January 9th, 2022. The first part of our tribute was, of course, counting down the top 5 Mtume joints, Mtume as the band. But now we're going to get into his production and songwriting work with another legend that has since transitioned as well, Mr. Reggie Lucas. The Mtume Lucas partnership, underrated. I mean, for people of that era that were around, it wasn't underrated to them. For those of us who were younger that weren't around back then, when that partnership was popping, but we're discovering the music as we get older now, the James Mtume and Reggie Lucas partnership was just undefeated. Very underrated, very, post disco. Even though, I mean, you could argue they were still making disco records, they just weren't, labeled disco at the time because post disco meant that, thanks to Marcus Chapman cluing me in that people went back underground. The disco scene went back to where it began in the earlier parts of the 70s in nightclubs, after dark. It wasn't people making movies about it. It wasn't, a cocaine spoon coming down from the ceiling of Studio 54, but people were still having fun doing the music. So today we are counting down the top 10 James Mtume and Reggie Lucas productions that you all should know. And this one we're going to start with at number 10. It's actually a James Mtume song written by himself. This is from 1976. It's from a New Orleans trumpeter Eddie Henderson, and it's called Inside You. It's from Eddie's Heritage album. I like that cover art, by the way. It's him as a young man playing the trumpet for his family, and then there's him in the foreground with this nice little argyle. I don't know if that's argyle. I don't think that's argyle. I don't think that's corduroy sweater either. But either way, it's a very nice sweater. It's, Eddie Henderson sitting in front of, this wonderful picture of him performing for, I guess, his family. And as a kid, now he's got this big adult trumpet as an adult. And Inside You is an instrumental piece. It's no lyrics, it's nobody singing it, but there's just like a intro that is just undefeated. Like it's an intro that really just grabs you. Like there's the piano part. And I think that's Mtume on the drums, coming in real sharp. And then, here comes Eddie on the trumpet. It is a great summertime song. Like I have it on my summer walking playlist. There's a playlist that I use when I go for walks on summer nights. And whenever Inside You pops up, I get a little pep in my step. So that is a song, if you're not familiar with James Mtume's jazz credentials, which are extensive, of course, because hello, he played with Miles Davis for so many years. That's how him and Reggie Lucas met. Inside You by Eddie Henderson is a good place to start. Number 9, we're going to the Stephanie Mills portion. There's a lot of Stephanie Mills on this countdown, as you guys are probably going to find out. And this is Put Your Body in It from the 1979 smash hit album, What You Gonna Do With My Lovin'. And this is one of those records that even if you are 75, 65, 55, 45, 35, you hear this and you just can't help but tap your toe. It is one of the funkiest records to come out of 1979. And it's not even close. Like you listen to that synth, boom, 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 boom. And there's a nice little, guitar bass under there. Boom, boom, boom. And the guitar comes in. And the strings. Oh my God, those strings. Wade Marcus did those strings, by the way. Rest in peace to Wade Marcus. His string work on What You Gonna Do With My Lovin' is just absolutely phenomenal. And Put Your Body in It is what that song says to do. Put your body onto the dance floor and just get a move on. And it's one of those records that qualifies as disco, qualifies as post-disco, or whatever you want to call it. It is a dance record that was befitting of the summer of 1979, the fall of 1979, the winter of 1980. It's just one of those records that even though, certain people, palm-colored, were done with disco, people who still love to dance were not. And Put Your Body in It was the perfect example of that. And this is Mtume on his own again in 1985, believe it or not. He produced Roy Ayers' album, You Might Be Surprised. And The song is titled Program for Love. It was written by a couple of other cats, but Mtume plays on it. Tawatha Aggie has a, background, more like a supporting, like almost like a lead vocal on this one. And it's so funny because Programmed for Love is the same thing as Computer Love. And they both came out tail end of 85, beginning of 86. Because Roy Ayers says in the beginning of Programmed for Love, the question next century is not going to be who you love, but what you love. It was almost like Roy Ayers and Roger Troutman predicted this whole shenanigans with AI and men buying sex robots and all that shenanigans. And it's like, I don't think that's what they meant, but that's what happened. Because yes, people, there are people out there, there are men out there right now buying sex robots. I kid you not. If I'm lying, I'm flying. And as you can see, my black ass is still here on the ground with y'all. Sex robots. Why? Why? Oh, we know why. We know why. You can control a sex robot. You can't control a woman. Yeah. Weirdo behavior. But yes, Programmed for Love. It's a fun record regardless. You mean Roy Ayers comes through big on the vibes as always. Mtume's on the keys. And I don't think that's Tawatha saying in a computer voice, I have no other function. But Programmed for Love is just one of those 80s records that is big on Afrofuturism, even though it sort of predicted this whole weird space we're in right now with technology just taking over all of our lives. Very, very interesting record. If you want to go back and listen to late era Roy Ayers and find out what Mtume was doing, post Mtume and disco and all of that good stuff. Still on What You Gonna Do With My Lovin', and we're gonna go to Starlight now, which is a little bit of a more of a mid-tempo that Mtume and Lucas wrote. And this song just is special from the standpoint of Stephanie Mills needed something to get her over. Because as we talked about, we actually did a review of What You Gonna Do With My Lovin' for Black Music Month. And I'll repeat what I said in that earlier episode is that Stephanie Mills needed hits after record labels like Motown and a few other places had just kind of sort of like, cast her aside. And 20th Century Fox signed her, and they got wind of what Mtume and Lucas had done for Roberta Flack and Donny Hathaway. More on that later on in this countdown. And they gave Stephanie over to them. And they said, we got to get this girl something that's going to get people up and moving. And as I, alluded earlier, putting out What You Gonna Do With My Lovin' for spring 1979 was a masterstroke of genius by the folks at 20th Century Fox. They said, this girl needs people to get up and moving. This is not a record that you're going to play in the winter months. You can if you want to, but What You Gonna Do With My Lovin' is a spring and summer album. Just from the peppiness of the up tempos to the smoothness and the chill factor, but still very intense of the mid tempos and the slow jams. It's a summer record. It's a summer record. And Mtume and Lucas came through for Stephanie big time, and it elevated her into the stratosphere. Once again, more on that later on in the countdown. Yep, we are back to What You Gonna Do With My Lovin'. This time we're talking about the title track. And there's a nice little trumpet part in here. There's the keys, there's guitar work, and then of course there's Stephanie, crazy about your smiling eyes. Please don't make me fantasize. And it's such a sweet record, but it's also very intense because you can look at the title of the album. You can look at the album art itself because again, when you look at the album art, there's this nice, beautiful picture of Stephanie from her shoulders up, her profile to the side. And it's what you're going to do on the front. And then you turn it around and she's got one leg, pointed outwards, not like up in the sky, but outwards. And she's pointing down to With My Lovin'. And Love Below, I don't think I have to explain it to y'all. We're all adults here. If you've seen the cover art, you know what in the back cover art, you know what I'm talking about. So What You Gonna Do With My Lovin' absolutely sounds like a challenge record. Like, what you gonna do when I get this to you? When I put it on you? What are you gonna do with this? Can you handle it? That's how they talked in 1979, man. And I think music was better when you could have a little bit of playfulness and some innuendo that wasn't just over the top with it. I mean, the stuff, and granted, I'm not that old to the point where I can be an old fuddy-duddy and say, this music today is just ridiculous. Because, for crying out loud, in the 70s, they had women moaning on records. So, we can't really just and pretend like that didn't happen. Like Donna Summer wasn't, you know, simulating sex for nearly 20 minutes on Love to Love You Baby. We can't pretend that there's not a woman absolutely in the throes of passion on Love Won't Make Me Wait by Major Harris. Like Marvin Gaye didn't employ that on 2 albums on Let's Get It On and I Want You. So we can't just sit here and say that the music of back in the day wasn't risky. But still, there was still some class to it. There was still some, some intelligent writing to it. And granted, this is coming from a dude who loves WAP because I just love how angry WAP made people. But WAP is very, well, it's WAPy. But a record like What You Gonna Do With My Lovin' leaves a little bit to the imagination. And that's what makes it so great. And speaking of more records with some innuendo behind it, another Mtume and Lucas production is from 1979. They had a year in 1979. You Know How to Love Me by Phyllis Hyman. And this is when Phyllis really sort of became a star that people, kind of sort of loved, but she never got the pop success because her only number one came late in her career. And she had the 13 Jinx. All of her R&B records only hit like 13, as high as 13 on the R&B charts. And You Know How to Love Me was the start of that. And that record starts off so great with the drums, the flute part. And here comes Phyllis. Measure for measure, your love so much pleasure. Like, you know how it goes. And just the fact that Mtume and Lucas, unfortunately, they only worked with Phyllis for one album because there was a lot of shall we say, tension going on there. I mean, there was Phyllis, we hadn't, people hadn't really grasped the fact that, she was dealing with mental illness like schizophrenia, bipolar 2, and all of that stuff. And I guess Mtume and Lucas just thought, yo, this heifer crazy. We can't work with her no more. And that sucked because I think that partnership, Mtume, Lucas, and Hyman, could have been as productive and probably more so or as good as Mtume, Lucas, and Stephanie Mills. But unfortunately, it didn't work out like that. And it kind of sucks, but you know, things happen. Unfortunately, we learned more about what was troubling Phyllis later on in her life and still couldn't stop the inevitable, but she's missed every day by the people who love music, by the people who love her. And her one go around with Mtume and Lucas, that whole album is great. I mean, Under Your Spell, which I didn't even put on this countdown. Probably I would jump a few records on this countdown, but these are the 10 that I think you should listen to if you want to get a good grasp of James Mtume's production skills. Number 4 on this countdown, 1980s Back Together Again with Roberta Flack and Donny Hathaway. Now, this record was sort of a stillborn record from the perspective of they started recording this in the winter of 78, 79 when Donny fell off of a building. Maybe nobody knows for sure how Donny Hathaway died other than he fell off of a very high building in New York City in January of 1979. But that song Back Together Again, it's another great dance record. There's a lot of synths on here, some great horn play. The bass, I think that's either Nathan Watts or Basil Farrington on the bass. I can't remember which one it is, but there's some great bass play on that record. And you just listen to it, and it's probably one of those records that the OGs would call a backward skating only type of song. Like people back when people used to go to the skating rink. I miss skating rinks. I couldn't skate worth to save my life, but I still went to the skating rink because, well, you had fun out there. As a kid, you go out there, you see your crush, you see, you and your homeboys, you plotting. It works out sometimes it don't. Maybe I'll do a show about the best skating songs because there are a few of those on my mind. But yeah, Back Together Again. It's a great song because you got Donny, in his last vocal. Well, it's not the last vocal performance. The last vocal performance he did was You Are My Heaven on that same record, but it's the last one that, made a dent on the charts that people heard his voice. Like that record came out a year after he passed. Yeah, I guess Donny was sort of kind of like the first posthumous star in that kind of way. I actually know you probably could make that argument. You definitely can make that argument for Otis Redding because it's sitting on Dock of the Bay came out after he passed. But I think Donny was like the latest in that line of people who died way too soon. but they still had some art to put out, and the art was actually decent. Can't say that about the stuff people have been putting out about Tupac and Big, but for Otis Redding, for Donny Hathaway, for Buddy Holly and those folks, the day the music died and all of that stuff, you know. But Back Together Again, it's a fun, it gives you a taste of what electro would be like in 81, 82, and so forth. Because there's that, there's this, synth part that just sounds really futuristic. And the rest is all just very classic instrumentals like the strings, the horns, the drums. I think that's a programmed drummer, if I'm not mistaken. But if it is a live drummer, I can't remember who it is, but it's a fun record to listen to, Back Together Again. And this is the record that actually launched James Mtume and Reggie Lucas's production career together. And it's The Closer I Get to You, once again by Roberta Flack and Donny Hathaway. This is on Roberta Flack's 1978 Blue Lights in the Basement album. And that song was written by Mtume and Lucas while they were touring with Roberta Flack. Of course, Lucas was on the keys, Mtume was doing percussion, and they wrote this in between gigs. Like they just, started working together, and the song was actually produced by somebody else, but Mtume and Lucas got writing credit because, well, they wrote it. And that's how things started to take off for them, because that song, The Closer I Get to You, it's one of the Quiet Storm classics. We talk about the genesis of the Quiet Storm being like 76, 77, 78. This is one of those records that you could hear on the original Quiet Storm with Melvin Lindsay at WHUR. Los Angeles radio, Chicago, Detroit, WDAS with Tony Brown and the Extrasensory Connection at the time. Well, he changed it to the Quiet Storm, but at first it was the Extrasensory Connection. And Love Is on the Menu with Deanna Williams. So The Closer I Get to You is just one of those early Quiet Storm hits that just does not ever get old. Like even the cover version by the late great Luther Vandross and Beyonce sounds good. It's a little more Luthery, that version, but the original version is just one of those ones that Black people who've been married for 50 years or even 40 or 45, they still grab each other at the cookout and just, slow dance throughout the grass, and you just look at them like, oh, and then you're reminded of just how much love sucks. I'm sorry. Just a random rant. But all kidding aside, The Closer I Get to You is just a wonderful, wonderful record. And it started what would become a very legendary production run for James Mtume and Reggie Lucas. 1981 now. I love this picture. I mean, I couldn't find a picture with just Steph and Ted together, but I think is that Reggie Lucas with the cowboy hat on? I think that's Reggie Lucas. I think that is him. But yes, this is Two Hearts that was released 45 years ago this month, January of 1981. And it's so funny because when you look at the music video, Teddy is sitting down in the chair the whole time. And people are like, wow, he did this record after the car accident. No, it's important to note that Teddy Pendergrass before his accident was about 6'2", 6'3". Stephanie Mills is about 4'9". So whoever directed that music video said, hey, listen, we cannot have this tall ass dude and this teeny ass woman standing up next to each other. So what they did was, and I think they did this during the live performances too, was that they had Teddy sort of like sitting at a piano or something, or just sitting down on a park bench, and then Stephanie either stands up or sits with him. It's not that much of a difference when they're both sitting down, but that was just one of those sleight of hands that, people had to do back then, because it's like, okay, yeah, this dude is like really tall and this woman is like really short. How can we fix this? So they got the idea to just have Teddy sit in a chair for the whole damn Two Hearts video, and then have Stephanie just like, walk up to him and, sing to him, and they sing to each other in the face, because that's the only way they're going to look each other in the face. So I'm sorry. It's just one of those things that just cracks me up. Like, yo, like, how creative did you have to be to, get a 6'3" guy and a 4'9" woman on eye level? You had to make it do what it do. And Stephanie and Teddy made it do what it do. Make no mistake about it. So, yeah, Two Hearts, just a great, great record. One of those mid-tempo bops and jams that people of a certain age just gravitate to and will never let go of, as long as they still have the gift of hearing. And for good reason, because Tawatha Aggie wrote this record, by the way. It's important to note that because a friend of mine, Shamika Rhymes, who has the Check the Rhyme show here on YouTube, she interviewed Tawatha Aggie and asked her what about was her favorite song that she wrote. And Tawatha said Two Hearts was her first baby. And it sucks that that record is not on stream. Like, I don't know if Stephanie got to, choke out the label heads because Stephanie Mills don't play. Like, she's never been about to play. So I would love for Stephanie Mills to get a hold of whoever has the masters of Stephanie and Sweet Sensation and say, put this stuff back on stream. Because a lot of my playlists are missing Two Hearts. I need Two Hearts on my Spotify. I'm just saying. And speaking of the Sweet Sensation album from 1980, this is the one. Never Knew Love Like This Before by Stephanie Mills. And it was so important for her to have a record that was going to be just as big or even bigger than What You Gonna Do With My Love. Like, you had to have something that was going to surpass that because everyone could see now, okay, Stephanie Mills has star quality. Now she needs consistency. And Mtume and Lucas came out guns a-blazing with Sweet Sensation. And then, of course, Never Knew Love Like This Before. It became an LGBTQ anthem. It became a lover's anthem. And it's just one of those songs that when you hear it, it makes you dance, but it also makes you emotional because of the way the lyrics just fall out. Never knew love like this before. Now I'm lonely nevermore since you came into my life. You know, it just makes you feel special. It just makes you feel warm. If you don't have the completely cold heart, and there are some people who have completely cold hearts, and that's fair because love will do that to you. But if you just have that warmth somewhere deep down inside of you, I guarantee you, Never Knew Love Like This Before will pull that out of you. And it is just an amazing record and just probably the best version of what James Mtume and Reggie Lucas did together as a production crew outside of Mtume. Because, of course, they did Mtume records together, but just for what they were able to do for other people. Give Phyllis Hyman a boost, make Stephanie Mills a star, give Roy Ayers some interesting music, keep Roberta Flack in the limelight, make people remember Donny Hathaway. So the stuff that Mtume and Lucas were able to do in the late 70s and early 80s deserves a lot more props from these music critics who swear that, post-disco R&B just wasn't good. Y'all missing out. You can look at people like Mtume and Lucas, Roger Troutman, Kashif. Oh my God. I need to do a Kashif show on here so damn bad, boy. I think I'm going to pull out the big guns for that. I'm going to put together a Kashif series where I talk to different people who know Kashif. Hey, Shamika, I'm going to be calling you. And some other folks, some musicians and artists that work with him because Kashif deserves he already had an unsung before he passed, but Kashif was one of those ones. Larry Smith did an episode on Larry Smith. Leon Silvers. It is one of my dreams to have Leon Silvers on this show. I don't know what I have to do, but if it's within reason, I will do it to have Leon Silvers the third on this show. But yeah, Mtume and Lucas, Kashif, Roger Troutman, Larry Smith, Leon Silvers, those folks, they are the ones that brought R&B into that electro boogie era that deserves way more props than it gets. And that's why I did this show, just to give James Mtume and Reggie Lucas they got their flowers while they were here, but hopefully they can still see us giving them their flowers from the great beyond. So yeah, that's going to do it for this edition of On the Groove Line. Greatly appreciate y'all as always. Contact information will be in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe and tap that notification bell so we notified of all the new videos that drop on this channel. And don't forget to like and comment on these videos. What do you think of this countdown? What Mtume and Lucas song would you put in and take out of this countdown? We'd love to know what you think. I always talk back in the comments. Oh, yeah, and I got a very special guest coming up for y'all this week. I can't wait to share this guest with y'all. She has written a memoir that is outstanding, and her musical career is one of great interest. So I can't wait to share this guest with y'all. My first guest of 2026. So thank you guys for riding with me on the Groove Line. And until the next time we ride, may you find the groove, or may the groove find you.